Hi everybody. As I was introduced, my name is Vlad. I work for a company called Fluidtime in Vienna. Please tell me if I'm speaking too fast. I'm not sure if the translators are doing good. Okay. So I come from a company called Fluidtime. We were founded in 2004. We started working on integrated mobility, combining different mobility means together in 2011. And in 2016, we were bought by the GOPgear group. So we work together with MaaS operators such as Ubigo, who offer different mobility services. We work together with large cities such as Helsinki, such as Stockholm, such as Aarhus, with 5 of the 6 Austrian largest cities in order to bring integrated mobility. Can I do this? Cool. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the picture of mobility today. And from an end user perspective, from a customer perspective, all the customers are dealing with fragmentation. In Austria, for example, but also within the region of the metropolis, you have a lot of transportation service providers who not all the time have very active collaborations within each other. So what happens a lot nowadays is that every transportation service provider has their own app for their phone. So the user needs to download 10 apps, for example. They need to register for all of these apps. They need to input their personal data, for example. So in each application, they need to put in sensitive data, such as their address, their mobile telephone number, their credit card number, their payment details, and so on and so forth. And then they need to, and only then they're able to actually start using the app to get themselves transportation. We see that customers want to go from A to B, and this might not be a trivial problem. So most of the time, the best way to get from A to B is to combine different means of transportation. But this is hard when you have 10 apps on your phone. It means you need to go into one app, calculate a small portion of the route, then go into another application, calculate another portion of the route, and then buy the ticket separately. So you need to do everything by hand. You need to calculate the routes by hand, you need to buy the tickets by hand, and for combining 2 or 3 transportation providers, it just gets very, very difficult. So this is why a lot of customers nowadays just prefer to take their own car to go from A to B, because for them it's a lot more convenient. But then when they actually go into a town, they're faced with I can show? Yeah, I can show something. So they're faced basically with the modern day city. We see that city officials are more and more tempted to introduce circulation restrictions. They want to create more pedestrian zones. They want to reduce the amount of cars in cities. They reduce the number of parking spaces, which can cost them money. So we see that on the left-hand side, in cities, in urban environments, there's more and more restrictions for car drivers. So it's a bit hard for them because on one hand, a car is very simple to drive from A to B, but then they have a lot of problems when they actually get into the cities. We think the solution is combining the fragmentation that we spoke about before. So combining the different ways of transportation into one single solution, basically, that can ease access to go into the city depending on the transportation mode, depending on the zone, and so on and so forth. So we want to use the richness of transportation to make everything accessible for the people. At the same time, we solve the problems that the cities have, that there's less and less cars and there's a collaborative way of transportation. So maybe it's good to discuss about who the key players are in these mobility ecosystems. On the left-hand side, you have the smart cities, such as the metropolis, for example. You have the regions as well. Their interest is to know very well what's happening in the city, to know who wants to go when and where. And they want to govern the entire ecosystem. They want to have the control over the mobility in the city. But this is hard because the fragmentation is present, so they don't really get a chance to put all the data together. The transportation service providers, they're investing a lot of money into marketing and publicity just to gain a bit of market share. So there's a lot of competition between them, even within public transport. And basically their main interest is to optimize their services. They want to get new customers and new markets to use their systems. Right in the middle you have the enabling services, such as routers, for example, or mobility platforms. Mobility companies who invest a lot of money into tailor-making mobility solution because there is no common platform, there's no baseline, basically. On the right-hand side, you have mobility service providers. These are so-called virtual operators. So most of the time, they buy the solutions from the transportation service providers. They buy 2 million tickets, for example, with a small discount, and then they sell them to the customers for more money, obviously, so they make a profit. And then at the end of the demand side, you basically have the customers. These are people like you and me, people who need to go from place to place, to go to their work, to go to a bar or to a restaurant afterwards, and they come from all walks of life. So students, for example, might have very different mobility needs than professionals who are already working. And the idea of collaborative mobility and MaaS ecosystems is to bring all of these partners to a table, to a marketplace for transportation, so to say. And there's a lot of ways of defining mobility as a service. There's a lot of ways of defining mobility ecosystems. We at Fluidtime, we want to do something very simple. We want to have a functional definition of mobility as a service. So for us, it's integrating all available means of transportation and putting them together and standardizing them so that we can offer them to the customers. We want to make it as easy as possible for the customers to consume these services. So we want to have advanced ways of payment, integrated payment, so that the customer doesn't have to wait in the middle of the street and put in his credit card number in the middle of the street. So we have integration, we have payments, and the last column, the last building block, basically, of mobility as a service is for us the ability to personalize the consumption of mobility. So students, for example, they might have a lot of time but little money, so they prefer bike sharing because it's cheaper and it's relatively quick. Whereas professionals who have maybe more money but not so much time, they prefer taxis or they prefer car sharing or fast trains, public transport, to get from A to B. So basically with our solutions, we want to offer these three building blocks to produce efficient service for everyone. And as an example, what we're doing right now in Stockholm, we're working together with UbiGo, and we are actively being sponsored by the city officials in Stockholm. We have integrated multiple means of transportation. The backbone of our transportation in Stockholm is public transportation. So with our application and with our platform, we offer tickets and subscriptions for the public transport in Stockholm. Within the product, we have a taxi provider called Cab Online. We have car rental from Hertz. We have car sharing, and we have bike sharing as well, within one standardized offer that is available to the customers in a simple application. The choice of UbiGo, this is what we call the reseller, the virtual operator, was to introduce a subscription and a package model for the customers. So you can buy, for example, a subscription for 30 days or 60 days with public transport in the entire Stockholm region. You can buy a package of shared car hours. So let's say you buy 100 hours that you can use either in car sharing, such as Drive Now or Car2Go, or you can rent a car and pay for the car using these hours, so to say. And then at the end of the month, basically you get a bill. You have consumed 100 euros of transportation, or slots of transportation, for example, where you have the prices for both the subscriptions to the public transport, to the shared car hours, And if you consume anything with a taxi, so if you ride a taxi, for example, from A to B, then you get the prices for the taxis as well, within the invoice that comes at the end of the month. This is a relatively simple model, and within the application we allow our users to personalize it. So they see every single time how much money they have left or how much money they have consumed, how many hours they can still drive, and how many days they have left, for example, for public transportation. It's a model that is working very well, and this can be highly customized basically for every need. So in effect, what we're trying to do is to put together a collaborative MaaS ecosystem. Our platform, basically, down here, it combines all types of transportation possible. First of all is public transport, which we believe is the most important. It needs to be the backbone of modern transportation. So by combining buses, trams, regional trains or suburban trains, for example, with car sharing, with ride hailing, such as Uber, with taxis and with bike sharing, we're able to put all of these offerings together into one single product and that is standardized and that is able to be used by multiple players. So basically we have down here a standardization layer. And then we have another layer, which is the business layer. This is where the user accounts are based, for example. So this controls the registration process, this controls the payments and the payment interfaces to external payment service providers, to external billing providers as well. And based on these two layers, there's a lot of companies that we can work with in B2B, basically. So the example that I gave with Ubigo is here to the left. Ubigo is a MaaS operator, but in a collaborative MaaS ecosystem, we're also able to work together with verticals, such as train companies, for example. So you might buy off the internet a ticket to take you from Warsaw to Katowice, and then within the same ticket, you would have 10 or 15 or 20 minutes with car sharing to take you from the train station in Katowice to your final destination, integrated into the solution. Auto clubs or tolling providers, for example, can use this collaborative platform to give mobility services, integrated mobility to their customers. And finally, we know that in the European Union, there's a lot of regulations saying that for each new apartment that you build, you need to offer a parking spot. So housing developers, for example, could circumvent this regulation by not building the parking spots, but offering their customers integrated mobility packages. So at the end of the day, the end users get door-to-door trips. They get first mile and last mile options. They get incentives to change their behavior, to try something new, to switch from the private car, for example, to integrated means of transportation. And they're able to consume all of these mobility offerings in a very simple way because they have integrated payment, they get the bill at home, or they pay as they go. It's highly configurable. And finally, the city officials, they get all the data anonymized, obviously, about the mobility environment. So they know which transportation modes are used, where they are used, when they are used, by whom they are used. So in effect, they're able to build a very clear picture of the ecosystem, and this allows them to govern it. They're able to say, look, this is a new neighborhood with younger people. I want more car sharing there, or more bike sharing, and I want to have more public transportation, for example, in another area that is not so well served. So for city officials, basically, you get complete transparency over everything that's happening in your city, which is a built-in functionality of the platform, basically. So at the end of the day, this is my last slide. The city official gets all the tools that they need in order to regulate and govern the ecosystem and shape the transportation as they want to. Through the extra customers, basically the transportation service providers and public transportation are able to get to new markets and make more money. they're able to reach wider audiences. The mobility service providers themselves, they can start business very, very easily by taking the standardized offerings and selling them to the customers. And finally, the customers themselves, through one application, they get so many modes of transportation that they're able to satisfy their mobility needs the way they want to. So thank you. I think that's it.